Welcome to council meeting today. I'll call the meeting to order. The first item of business is 1.1. Is there any items appearing on today's agenda where there may be a conflict or a pecuniary interest? See, there's no indication of anything, so we'll consider that none appears. On today's agenda, we're just gonna, because we're paying our accountants by the hour, we're gonna move 7.1 up a little bit to save a little bit of money here. But so it'll proceed the sixth area. So just so everybody out there knows that we're being good stewards of the money here, eh? But otherwise, is there any additions to the agenda? I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Simpson, any discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. And we have 3.1, the regular council meeting minutes of April 8th, 2019. Councillor Pauls.
12.2 and 12.3 are listed as voting, and I wasn't here. So,
Okay. Okay. Well, you were on our mind, I'm sure. So. Okay. And Councillor Holm?
Yes, just in 7.1, the first bullet, I believe there's kind of a wording error there. I think it probably is supposed to say that Kyle Beauchamp, Director, Corporate Services, responded that this is generally done this time of year, and it probably should be saying, and needs to be done before the financial statement is completed. And it actually says this time of year and is need to have done before.
Oh, okay. Just clean that up a bit. Yeah. That was after a rough week of curling in that.
Probably how he said it.
So with those amendments, I'll entertain a motion to adopt. Councillor Holm moves the minutes as amended. All in favor? Okay, and then 7.1, we have Avail Accounting and Kyle on deck. So I'll give the floor over to Kyle to lead off.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. With me, I have Nadine Granson from Avail CPA. Just excuse my voice. We are at the sick table today. So we have the 2018 audited financial statements. So there, just have a little presentation for you. As we go through this, just for note on each slide, when I have comments, I also have the page number referencing to the financial statements, just for ease when you're following along here. So the first page, we have the statement of operations and accumulated surplus. So this is basically the income statement. Down at the bottom line there, annual surplus for 2018 is $8,049,485 compared to $2.6 million last year. So I'm just going to first start off going over some of the variances from actual revenue to budget. So property taxes were $196,000 higher than budgeted. This is due to additional tax revenue from the Lethbridge County annexation. User fees, such as utilities and fees to user groups, were 6% higher than we had budgeted. This was due to increase in usage in the facilities and not an increase in budgeted price. Government transfers for operating. So these include like operating grants that we receive. We received an additional $50,000 from FCM for our accounting software, a grant that we didn't previously budget for. Land sales and development levies, these can be variable year to year depending on how much land is sold. In 2018, nothing was budgeted, which is one of the big differences. So total revenue for land sales and development levies just came over $4.1 million. Franchise fees and investment income, these were higher because the budget amounts were a little more conservative than before. Our highway and photo radar revenue was $65,000 lower than we had anticipated. And finally, we have grant revenue from the Malloy project. of $3.1 million that was not previously budgeted. So this is additional revenue. So that was the revenue side. Now we're going to go over the expenses. So same page 6 there of the financial statements. Legislation, so this includes council expenses, were lower than budgeted due to lower costs on travels, per diem, and council lobbying. Administration, you see, is higher than budgeted. One of the big reasons for this is when the salaries are budgeted based on how they're actually booked, there is difference in the year. For example, we had a lot more salaries that were budgeted for different departments, as in, stuff that should have been under public works or fire. But due to changes in the year, these were put to administration. So it does show administration is much higher than budgeted. But again, this is mostly because of this allocation there between the departments. Police, regulatory, and emergency services. Our RCMP costs were $317,000 lower than budgeted. We also had lower costs on the internal safety grants and capital portions, and along with part of the wage difference. As I mentioned, administration was part of the reason for the budget being, or the actual being lower than budget. Fire, we had efficiencies in parts, training, fire association expenses, and repairs. Road, streets, this is basically public works here. We had a $120,000 surplus in fuel and parts expense. Road, alley, and sidewalk repairs were lower due to lower cost, and as well as vacancies within various positions during the year. Storm and drainage, this was about $200,000 higher than budgeted for the storm pond and additional equipment rentals that were over budget. Water supply. Our water supply was $130,000 over budget. This was due to additional usage that was not in the budget. This additional usage coincides with increased user fees, right? So your revenues go up because you're selling more utilities, so you have more expenses. Waste management. Overall, waste management was fairly close to budget, but there was some efficiencies there. Wastewater. So sewer, we had a lot of projects and repairs that were budgeted for 2018 that were pushed back to 2019 to get better costing, such as the sewer realignment program. Planning and development. There was various studies planned for 2018, such as the offset levies, the IDP, the infrastructure, and the stormwater master plans. Again, these were budgeted to 2018, but pushed back to future years just due to capacity restraints. Parks, recs, facilities, culture, community relations. There was various efficiencies within these departments, as well as projects that were planned within the year that were pushed back. For example, there was a new website design, the Coaldale 100th anniversary that were allocated 2019, as well as general savings in community events and other costs such as the arena fire panel that were moved back to 2019 due to capacity restraints. So if I can go. Okay, so those just kind of highlight what we've budgeted and what we actually spent in the year. So again, actual surplus for the year was $8.049 million. I'll touch back on that in a second here. So now just wanting to compare expenses, actual expenses for the year compared to the past. So they're all kind of up there for you to see. Salaries and wages up 6%, contracted services up 5%, materials, goods, supplies up 13%, transfer to local boards and organizations down 9%, interest down 48%, other expenses down 54%, and then amortization. So overall, the expenses for the town of Coaldale increased 4% year over year compared to the prior year. 4% is it's a reasonable increase from year to year. There's nothing out of the ordinary here. One of the biggest things is interest is so much lower this year. The town paid off a bunch of high interest bearing debt last year in 2017. So that's why that interest has decreased so much for this year. Just going to keep going through here unless there's any questions right now. Anybody? Okay, so probably the question we're all looking at is there's a surplus of over $8 million. So what happened to this? This doesn't mean that the town currently has $8 million more in the bank than they did at the beginning of the year. $7.26 million has already been spent on capital assets. So for example, just under $4 million was invested in the Malloy project. Just over $2 million was invested in the Northeast Industrial Park. Then we acquired additional land, fire vehicles, and other capital assets. A portion of that surplus, $240,000, was spent on debt repayments. And then the net of that, so about $3.2 million has been earmarked for future reserves, restricted and unrestricted. So that's how the surplus of $8 million shakes out. Again, you can see most of it has already been spent on capital assets. We'll touch base on your reserves here. So we have a 3-year trend. On the left, you have unrestricted and restricted surplus. So this is more of your operating surplus on the left, and on the right is equity and capital assets. This is the investment in our capital infrastructure. So you can see there's a big increase in 2018. Again, a large reason is the investment in the Malloy project, along with the Northeast Industrial Park. Again, on the operating side, you can see the total reserves is just under $19 million compared to 2017 when it was just over $16 million. Again, this is just putting additional funds and surpluses into reserves that are available for future expenses and future use, such as future capital projects. So that was the equity and the income statement part of the presentation. Now we have the financial position, statement of financial position. So this is in theory, the balance sheet. Total assets there of $24 million, up from 21 last year. And net financial assets of 14.7, up from $13 million. So the net financial assets there of $14 million, that's in theory the liquid assets, net assets of the town of Coaldale, taking your current assets minus your current liabilities. So again, kind of a trend analysis here. You can see from 2016, 17, and 18, it has increased by roughly, I'd say $1.7 million each year. Again, these are the net liquid assets of the town. Comparing some of the balance sheet items from last year, cash has increased by $500,000. Accounts receivable increased by $850,000. This was due to multiple agreements and transactions which were finalized in 2018, but cash didn't get received until 2019. Land held for resale increased by $1.5 million. This is due to additional land the town acquired, as well as some reallocations between capital assets and land held for resale. There can be land and capital assets that the town is planning to or holding for as an asset. Land held for resale is more liquid land that the town has earmarked for future sale or development, for example. So this is more liquid land rather than land we're sitting on. Accounts payable did increase by $280,000. This is just due to additional costs owing at the end of the year for the Northeast Industrial Park. Deferred revenue increased by $1.25 million. Received the federal gas tax grant for 2 years. That wasn't spent in the year, as well as received a contribution from Lethbridge County for the new aerial truck that hasn't been delivered yet. So deferred revenue, again, is grants received that we haven't yet spent. Long-term debt did decrease just by the principal repayments. There was no new debt acquired in the year. And the last one there, other assets, you'll see there's a big jump of about $1.3 million. This is due to the deposit paid on the aerial truck, along with other assets. It's considered a deposit as it's not yet delivered to the town at the end of the year. Final point of the presentation, just a summary of the debt limits. Under the MGA, the town is able to borrow based on certain operating revenues. At the end of the year, our debt capacity was just under $31 million, while the actual use was only 13%. So again, as we had noted in the capital budget, we do have some debt forecasting in future years with additional capital projects. That's just showing that the town is currently well under the debt capacity limit. That's all I have for, excuse me, presentation on the financial statements. I'm just going to turn it over to Nadine, who's just going to go over the audit report here.
All right, so I've included a package here with, they don't have the financial statements in them, as Kyle already reviewed through them. What I'll go through is the audit reports that we attach to the financial statement information. So there's two letters in there that say avail at the top. One of the audit reports is for the FIR, which is the financial information return. That's the one that is government formatted, and we have to send to Alberta Municipal Affairs. The other one is for the corporate style statements, which Kyle just ran through. So we attach both audit reports. Not sure if you remember the audit report from last year, but it should have been much smaller. This year, it's a little bit longer. It's 2 pages. The audit report was revamped in order to try and provide more information to the users of the financial statements as to what actually the responsibilities are of management and what the responsibilities are of the auditor. So there's a little bit more information in there. The most important thing you'll want to note is the opinion is at the top of the audit report now. And on both the FIR and the corporate style financial statements, Avail has issued a clean audit opinion, which is what you want. All right. So those are your audit reports. In addition to providing the audit report on the financial statement and the FIR, we also have to provide another piece of documentation, which is the 1-page letter in your package. It's what's called a management letter. And so we come in and we do all our audit procedures and we test and we bug Kyle and Tim and the team for like weeks on end. And we look at transaction streams from start to finish and revenue and expenses and payroll. We look at everything we possibly can. If anything comes to our attention that would help make the town of Coaldale more efficient and effective, we would bring it forward in a management letter. We found one point that we'd like to bring forward today. When we were doing our utility testing, we noted that the utility billing rates for the beginning of 18 didn't change. We were still using 17 rates, but that was changed as a mid-year and the new rates were being charged. And we've noted that the new rates for 19 are in place and being properly charged. So that's the only point we needed to bring forward from our audit. Okay, so no issues for the town at this point regarding that. Okay. The other letter that I need to go through is what's called a post-audit letter. So it's the one with the staple on it. We issue a pre-audit letter saying this is how we're going to perform our audit, these are the procedures we're going to do, and the post-audit letter kind of wraps up the whole audit in a letter. So on page 2 of the letter, there's certain matters that I have to communicate to council. The first one being significant deficiencies in internal controls. So we do test those internal controls for the town. And if there were any inefficiencies or problems with the internal controls, we'd report those in the management letter. There were none. The only one issue was with the utility billing rates. We also have to touch on illegal acts and fraud, probably the best topic to cover, the one that's not uncomfortable at all. But an audit isn't designed to find fraud and illegal acts. An audit is designed to come in and make sure that those statements are fairly presented. But the way we perform our audit, by testing the controls, by looking at the transaction streams, by doing all that, if we came across fraud or illegal acts, we were to report it to council. And I'm happy to say that we didn't run across any issues during our audit. We also have to report if there were any disagreements with management and ourselves, and I'm thinking we're okay. And that we totally received the full cooperation of management. The team was amazing. Tim, Kyle, Kaylin, all the team at the town, amazing staff that you have, made the audit so much easier. Generally, a first-year audit, we cringe because it's terrifying going in to do a first-year audit, but they made it so much better. So thank you to them all for that. The only other thing that's on the post-audit letter that I do want to point out is that there are some standards, accounting standards that are coming up that are going to become effective for the next fiscal period for the town of Coaldale. You guys follow what's called PSAB, Public Sector Accounting Body Standards, and there are some changes coming down. The most of the changes have to do with investments and how they're presented and how they're disclosed in the financial statements. A little bit to do about foreign currency translation. So we'll work together with your team to make sure that these PSAB announcements that are coming up, that the town is meeting those. All right. Now, are there any questions at all I can answer about the audit, the process, anything like that right now?
Questions through to the auditor?
Okay.
All right.
Perfect. I just want to say we've included a fun document. I know auditing's not fun, but this is a fun document. What we do is we get the information off other towns and comparable sites, and we do some ratios to show you the financials, you know, how the viability of the town is doing compared to others. And I'm not going to run through the whole document, but it's great information in here. It really truly shows what good financial shape that the town is in when you compare it to other towns. So if you actually go to page 2, I'll touch on a few of them just to show you how they work. The sustainability indicators all show that the town's assets are much greater than their liabilities. And that's the position you want to be in. You want to have all those liabilities fully funded and have extra assets left over. And you can see how fairly consistent from year to year those indicators are. So very good indicators there of sustainability. Going on to page 3, those are more sustainability ones. On page 4, these are your flexibility indicators, and these are basically showing how low the reliance of the town of Coaldale is on debt to fund their operations and their capital. We're finding other ways to do it, whether it's through grants or tax assessments or whatever. But that's a good position to be in, that we have that low debt servicing and that we have that ability, just in case something comes up, that we can go get that debt because we're low on that debt side. Okay? So those are all awesome. The one that on page 5 that I want to point out is the net book value to cost of tangible assets. Just see how straight the line is. That's a good thing because the town of Coaldale is maintaining the value of its assets. We're replacing them at a very consistent level, and we're maintaining that, and that's perfect to see. Okay. The one that I want to point out is the one underneath, the infrastructure investment. It might look like the town of Coaldale went way up off the chart there, but the reason why is because we had a huge amount of tangible capital additions in the current year. So that'll come back down and normalize itself a little bit, but it's not a bad thing. You're maintaining that tangible capital asset balance. The last one I want to point out is on page 7. And Kyle kind of touched on this a little bit about showing you how your accumulated surpluses to reserves. And it's a good thing that we're taking our accumulated surpluses and setting them aside in reserves for those future purchases or purposes. And it's showing that the town of Coaldale is very consistent in doing that and taking that accumulated surplus and setting it aside. So I went through all the indicators. None of them indicated anything out of the norm, all very normal within other town standards or even above that. So it's a good read if you're needing that one night. So that's in there as well. All right.
So that kind of wraps up our presentation of the 2018 statements. Just want to thank Nadine and her staff at Avail for all the hard work they did. It was a good, easy, clean audit process. With that, if there's any other further questions that we could answer, any further information we could provide, is my recommendation that we approve, the council approves the 2018 audited financial statements for the town of Coaldale.
I just want to comment that this is a terrific presentation, and with the colorful, easy, fun part that you included, I think answers a lot of the questions that many people in council might have, that gives you a little bit of comfort knowing that we're on a good footing comparable to other municipalities. So I think that's a valuable piece. And on behalf of council, I'm glad to hear that you had full cooperation of management and staff. That's an important part of the audit process. So that's good. Well done, Kyle, for cooperating like that. Is there any questions through to either of our presenters before we entertain approval of the financial statements? Once, if council so desires to approve the financial statements, then just for a minute or two after, Kaylin and I will sign them so that our auditor can go about their business and go and maybe do some more presentations or something. So, okay, so with that, Kyle's recommendation is that we would approve the audited financial statements. Does anybody care to? Councilor Avery? Councilor Avery approves approval of the audited financial statements as presented. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's approved. Thank you. Okay, and then going back into proper sequential order, we have Kyle's gonna have the majority of the spotlight on him today. So we have 6.1 mill rate bylaw 756C04-19.
Okay, thank you. So we have the 2019 mill rate bylaw here. So as identified in the 2019 operating budget, which was approved by council November 26, 2018, there's a planned 0% increase in the residential mill rate, municipal mill rate, and a 4% increase in the non-residential mill rate. Keep in mind, when we do increases or decreases to the mill rate, we also have to take into effect inflation in properties. So when we were initially doing the budget, we had forecasted, or with the work of our assessor, had forecasted a 0% inflation rate for residential and a 3% inflation for non-residential. These amounts came back higher than anticipated, so the actual inflation rate for residential amounted to 0.82% with a 2.24 growth rate. Non-residential came back with an inflation rate of 4.99% and a growth rate of 6.62%. So as a result, since these inflation rates were higher than anticipated during the budget process. There was a surplus calculated based on the budgeted mill rates. As a result of the surplus, we've adjusted the mill rate to actually decrease for both. If we scroll to the next page here, there's just a summary of the residential and non-residential mill rate. The 2018 amounts versus on the proposed 2019 amounts in the actual. So you see the municipal residentials actually decreased by 1.58%. When at the budget process, we had anticipated that being 0. The non-residential municipal decreased by 0.99% when we actually anticipated a 1% increase in the budget process. One other point to highlight is the education portion. The education mill rates have not been finalized by the Alberta government, likely due to the recent election. As a result, with the assistance of our assessor, we have estimated the education mill rate for 2019 based on what the actual comes back from the Alberta government. If there's an over amount or an under amount for a levy, this would then be adjusted in the future year. So for example, if the mill rate is actually lower than what we have here, the reduction would be seen next year, and vice versa if it was higher. Any questions on this?
Any questions for Kyle? Okay. Oh, Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Your Worship. More of a comment than a question, Kyle. I really appreciate the transparency of how you've presented this and how you've followed the direction from our budgeting talks to now. And, we're now not playing with mill rate to assessment value. We're actually saying when 0%, we will lower the mill rate, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, we can proceed on to first reading if council so desires. Councillor Simpson moves for first reading of the bylaw. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Councillor Chapman, you're going to sponsor second reading? Councillor Chapman sponsors second reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, and then we're able to, for expediency, have a unanimous consent motion to do all 3 readings. Does anybody care to put forward a unanimous consent motion? Councillor Lloyd? All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Councillor Chapman, you're sponsoring third. Thank you. Any discussion to third and final reading motion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is carried. All right. Then we have the supplementary assessment bylaw 755C0419. Kyle.
So the town of Coaldale has supplementary property taxes. So each year, a supplementary bylaw needs to be passed by council before May 1st. The supplementary bylaw basically just goes over allowing the assessor the ability to produce a supplementary assessment. So this bylaw is required each year, so this is just updating this from the past year. If there's any questions on the bylaw?
Any questions for Kyle? Okay. Councillor Chapman.
I'll make a motion to proceed with first, second, and third reading of this bylaw.
Okay. Okay, so you're supporting the first reading then? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, Councillor Holm. Questions? Call the question. All in favor? Unanimous consent motion if Councillor Simpson moves for unanimous consent. Have all three readings in one sitting. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay. And Councillor Lloyd moves for third and final reading. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. All right. And then 6.3.
Okay, the third and final bylaw you have in front of you is the special tax bylaw 754-C-04-19. So as identified in the 2019-2021 capital budget, the design and construction of a recreation facility within Coaldale has a budgeted cost of $10 million, subject to the passing of the borrowing bylaw. This will be funded through a $10 million debenture repayable over 25 years. The current Alberta Capital Finance Authority interest rate is 3.132%. This over 25 years would create an annual repayment of $579,000 and $579,800. This payment would be funded through the levy of a special tax. The special tax would apply to each developed residential parcel of land within the municipal boundaries of the town of Coaldale at a rate of $120 per developed residential parcel of land within the boundaries of the town of Coaldale. So this would not apply to vacant lots within the town, nor non-residential lots. Is there any questions on this bylaw?
Any questions through the Kyle? So it's understood that this would be implemented upon approval of the borrowing bylaw, and
Yeah, it would be subject to approval. It would come out as part of the 2019 property tax assessment.
any other questions or comments? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you so much for putting this together, Kyle. The question I have would be, the bylaw is relative and strictly to this portion, this purpose.
Correct. The levy is strictly to be used for the construction and development, or design and construction of the recreation facility.
If there's any visionary aspects for the future, this would have to be adjusted, or would we have to review that bylaw again?
So this bylaw would have to be approved on an annual basis.
Okay. I'll make a motion to proceed with the reading of the special tax bylaw.
And we have Councillor Chapman sponsoring first reading, and Councillor Holm, you have a question or a comment?
I do. I just was wondering, then I'm assuming there will be a separate account set up for this levy in case we don't build a rec center for 2 or 3 or 5 years from now, that money will be put into a specific reserve just for this
That's correct.
recreation facility?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? We have a motion on the floor. Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of first reading? Okay. That's unanimous, yes. Sorry about that. Okay. Anybody care to sponsor second reading? Councillor Lloyd? Okay, I see Councillor Lloyd sponsor second reading. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that too is carried unanimously. Unanimous consent motion. Okay, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Okay, Councillor Chapman sponsors third and final reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Kyle. Now getting to later topic. Item 7.2, Green Acres Golf Tournament. Lana has prepared the report. The funds are in our normal budget already for this being the annual event. So I think we could just, if council so wishes, to sponsor the sponsorship and then decide on the participants before. I think she needs to know, when do you have to know, Lana? Okay. Okay, so we have two choices. Does anybody care to exercise option 1 or 2? Councilor Chapman?
I was prepared to move that we receive the report for information.
Okay. You have that motion. Any discussion?
A motion is that you receive.
Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. And against? Councillor Holm? All right. And then we have 7.3. Cindy.
So this is for, so in 2018, we put up park identification signs in the majority of the parks in Coaldale. So we had 4 parks that were left without names. So we did some public engagement, social media, newsletters, sending out postcards to neighborhoods, and putting signs up in the library. So the 4 parks that still need names are the pocket park located next to the library, the dog park, the park located in Parkside, and the park located in Westgate. So I've given the top 2 or 3 choices for each, or if council has something else that they would like in those. We'd like to get the signs up in the remaining parks for identification purposes. And then we do have the Cottonwood Stormwater Pond and Malloy Phase 2 that will be constructed or finished this year, and how council wishes to proceed with naming of those.
Councillor Simpson.
Just to clarify, so like the number 1 choice for the pocket park, like was it like question and the most people responded that they like the literacy lane?
No,
As number 1, or is it just in kind of just whatever names were out there?
so at the library, right before Settlers Days last year, we had put up a board with a picture of the park and asking when kids came in from Settlers Days or during the summer programming to write down. There was a variety. I have it in my office if you want to stop and see some of them. They are quite interesting. So these were 2 that I had sent out a variety of options for each to some internal members of staff to see how to narrow it down a little bit. And these were our top for all of them.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you so much, Cindy, for putting this together. My thoughts are these, and that is for number 1 would be literacy lane. Dog park, I consider the dog park to be Coaldale Dog Park, as we only have the 1 plus. I didn't see anything really outstanding, even with number 3. Parkside and Westgate, I think that those are relative to the areas that have parks, and those are suffice to me.
Counselor Holm.
So I'd like to move that we use alternative 1 for all 4 of them, and that we engage the public for a community contest for the naming of the Cottonwood Stormwater Pond and Malloy Phase 2.
And we have, I was just wondering, okay, Counselor Avery?
Go ahead.
Just wondering if we didn't already name the Malloy Phase, is that not Centennial Park, or was that something that we already, I was just wondering, it's just clarifying if we, council didn't already kind of put their thoughts onto that, but go ahead, Keelan, and then,
Quick point on phase 2A, so the north portion is Centennial Park, but there's still the part south of the highway that
Oh, okay.
isn't part of the Centennial aspect, which is probably 20 or more acres in size that requires naming.
all right, Counselor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if this isn't an opportunity. We looked at naming some of our streets after some of those citizens that have served and gone over and above in our town. If this isn't an opportunity to look at naming them after people rather than a drop in, like, is there someone that we can name our parks after? I know a lot of communities do that, so should we start looking at that rather than giving them a name them after somebody in memorial of?
But we do have a motion by Counselor Holm at this point, right? And you're looking at option number 1 in all of those instances there. And your motion reads to seek public engagement on the Malloy Drain 2 south portion and Cottonwood Pond, is that right? Okay. Counselor Lloyd,
Yes, can we make those 5 different motions, please?
you want it split? Okay. Is that all right to divide the motion then?
I think it'd be much simpler if we just do it all in one.
So what if we don't agree with all of them, just agree with 1 or 2? Should have a choice.
Okay. Any other discussion then? So with the omnibus motion as read out earlier, with Councillor Holmes sponsoring, naming all the ones there, exercising option number 1 in all those instances for those 4 parks, and then seeking public engagement on the Malloy Drain 2A south portion and the Cottonwood Pond. Okay, so we have that motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, we have 3-4 and opposed. Okay. And so now, do you want to? Does somebody want to move forward?
I'll make a motion to approve the Pocket Park location as number 1, Literacy Lane.
Okay. We have a motion by Councillor Simpson naming the Pocket Park as Literacy Lane. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? We have 5, 4, and 2 against. Councillor Lloyd and Councillor Avery. Okay. Anybody? We have the Pocket Park. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe just a question through to Cindy on the dog park. Were these recommendations that came forward, or were these administration?
No, these were all recommendations from the public.
Councillor Lloyd.
Yes, Your Worship, is there any reason we can't just say Coaldale Dog Park?
No, that's up to council.
I would make that motion.
Okay, Councillor Lloyd moves that the dog park be named Coaldale Dog Park. Is that correct? Okay. Any discussion? Okay, call the question. And opposed? You have 2. You get those, Glenn? Okay. All right. And then we have Parkside Park. Okay, Councilor Chapman moves Parkside Park. All in favor? And opposed? Yeah, it's just we're getting less opposition now, so Councilor Avery. Okay, and then, so Westgate Park. Councilor Holm. Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Oh, okay, we wore them down, all right. Okay, and then, did you want to advance your motion for the other 2 then?
I'd like to move that we send to the community to name the Cottonwood Stormwater Pond and Lloyd Drain Phase 2A South, and that the contest be available for people's names plus places.
So your motion is to embrace what your colleague, Councilor Avery says as a methodology to perhaps honor residents, okay? Okay. All right, do we have any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. Good. Thank you, Cindy. And we have information items, and I think Councilor, at this point, I'll allow Councilor Chapman, he wanted to have a comment on FCSS at the time, so go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Move to receive these for information items, but in advance, I'll just speak quickly to Barron's Eureka and FCSS. The last 6 months have been really exciting times for the board, and if you've read through the reports, they really characterize the direction that FCSS is taking. Our executive director has really taken the pulse of the association, plus the board has really worked hard now. Seem to be on the same page with all the members on board. Since our strategic plan in February, it seems like we're really starting to move ahead for the next 12 months. In the meantime, being that we didn't have an all councils meeting in last week, that our executive director Zach Morrison will be doing a road show to meet with all the councils individually to present the work of FCSS. One of the great things I've found with this association is the work that they're really doing with the Low German Mennonite community, and it's becoming very fruitful, and it's very rewarding in all the efforts that they're encountering.
Thank you, Councilor Chapman, and then obviously one of your longer term members, former Mayor of Coots, Tom Butler, passed most recently, and he was a good colleague for elected officials around Southern Alberta, and he'll be missed as well. So we have a motion by Councilor Chapman to receive all the items within 11 for information. Is there any other discussion or comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Yeah, that's carried. And that draws us to the end of the public session of the meeting. A motion to go into closed session, please. Councilor Simpson. All in favor? Okay, good. We